Talk to us about the changing role of the Chief Information Officer.
Thank you very much. Effectively, the changing role really is one of moving from a back office operations role to more what we call the front office, or the demand side of the business, where you're becoming far more involved, especially in terms of the economic recovery and assisting the organization to recover. The big aspect that we find in terms of technology is the CIO is no longer the technology guru, as it were. In my instance, I make sure I'm not the technology guru, but I'm far more associated with the business and where the business is trying to go, especially from a growth perspective.
Is that indicative of the fact that technology and information systems and data services have become a core function of how we generate information and operate as corporates?
Well, the technology itself is fairly pervasive already. And so from that perspective, we find that the background works. You know, the lights are on. It's a typical that scenario of the lights being on. Where we need to take far more of a role, an active role, is how do we assist organizations to, one, recover, and secondly, to grow. And effectively, the Chief Information Officer, as it were, is moving more towards the Chief Innovation Officer or the Chief Integration Officer to be much closer to business.
Just applying it to the ambit of the work that you do at SAPPI, which already is a multinational, globally prominent company, how do you help them become relevant and competitive in a changing African environment, for instance?
Okay, well, there's two things that you're dealing with. Africa is a paradox when it comes to IT. So I'll hit that question first in terms of what is the paradox that we're dealing with, specifically pertaining to Africa. And the important element about that is Africa is interesting from the point of view that in some instances you have highly developed technology, and we're very much first world, especially in South Africa and places like Nigeria, for instance, and right up into Kenya, etc. And there the connectivity is really good. But when you move outside of that, you're finding that the basics are simply not in place in terms of infrastructure and the connectivity that goes out to rural areas. We call it the last mile. So I would say in the developed areas of Africa, there's high degrees of IT sophistication, but outside of that, very unsophisticated. Although, funny enough, cell phones are everywhere. But within a corporate environment such as where I come from, the important thing for me is to become more relevant. So in a sense, we're not irrelevant, but at the same time, we haven't really played a role from a business side and the demand side of our business in terms of being competitive globally.
Lumkile, somebody said on the show the other day, in the 1990s, the growth node was ICT and telecommunications. In the 2000s, the growth node is infrastructure and not so much technology in terms of ICT as we know it.
Well, we still think that infrastructure, in fact, is past. We think more the software and the interconnectivity with cell phones, because I think we've seen the tablet. That tablets, they've had a huge impact in terms of where to work at what time, particularly if you are linked to your system back at home. So for example, it makes decision making much quicker. It makes looking at business plan and deciding whether to give this person money or not, in our case, much easier. Therefore, as an enabler and as a strategy, it's a very, very good platform to have.
I mean, Bradley's talking about the fact that it's elevating the game of a company, especially in this era of change. What does that mean for you? I mean, yes, it's an enabler, it makes things move a little bit quicker, but has it elevated your game as the IDC? Have you become a lot more competitive as a company?
Well, that's a gap that we've missed in the past few years, was exactly using technology to be efficient, to make sure that the money does go into the economy. And hence what we've done is that our IT and strategy are now linked, and with an innovation department that works together with strategy. So we hope through that we'll be able to service the South African industry as well as the new areas for development much more quicker. But more important, that the money that's in the IDC does go to customers much quicker, because if we're going to create the jobs that government wants to do, we need technology to make sure that our clients who are much more advanced technologically can access us much easier and much quicker.
What are the trends we're likely to see in this new world order?
A number. I'd say that people are far more connected. They call about on-demand in terms of information requirement. And the connectivity element in terms of people being connected needs to be well understood by organizations. A good example is we first of all looked at how do we connect people from a cell phone point of view. The next stage is how do we get to deliver them services associated with cell phones. So banking is a good example of that. So the pervasive nature of the technology has moved to the consumer side rather than keeping the lights on, as we call it, on the back end of the business. And so the engine rooms are intact. The big thing is what are the services that you want to deliver that are going to generate revenue, especially growth. And that's where the CIO needs to play far more of a role in terms of saying, does what I'm doing from a technology point of view give me the revenue improvements that I'm looking for as an organization? As well as the fact that you need to look at the consumer side of the business and understand what the consumer really wants.
Just going back to sort of an industry-specific focus, I mean, we look at you guys as paper manufacturers, you know, globally active, and one would ask, what would be the next big thing for a SAPPI in that respect?
Well, SAPPI paper is core and will be core in the next years to come. The big thing for us is what do we do in terms of utilizing fiber generally, and where are those markets? We're not only just in paper, we're in pulp, we're in forestry, and the other aspect about it is that we're also in cellulose. And a lot of people don't know where cellulose goes to. And so in terms of cellulose, you can look at your own garments. We provide the base product for the viscose market, for instance, that goes into textiles. And so from that perspective, we see a huge amount of growth coming from that area of the business.